Welcome to The Way Home with Laura Smith, the show that brings you wonderful guests, helpful advice, and uplifting stories. The Way Home. Live inspired. Here's your host, Laura Smith.
I'm so fortunate in this business to be able to talk with so many different, not only writers, but thinkers, philosophers, creators. It truly is one of the greatest gifts. And I'm just so happy that I get to bring you such a diverse group of people in terms of when I do author series. I have everything from juicy curl up on your couch with novelists to people like my next guest, William Truax. He has written a book that is getting high acclaim now, very highly acclaimed. And Reality 2.0 is being called a revolutionary new look at the universe and life. You talk about getting courage to take on topics such as these during these times, I would say. William Truax, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Reality
2.0, just that alone is a very heady topic. What made you decide to try to answer life's questions and how we got here and who are we? Are we spiritual? Are we material beings? Are we biological? Are we consciousness? These are the types of questions you have not only bothered you, but very courageously asked and come up with some interesting theories on such. Even some words that you call them that I hadn't thought about before, but like words like essentia and you call things stuff. And I think, wow, this is a man who wants to get into the nitty gritty, but also teach us something that maybe we haven't thought about for a long time. Many of us steeped in, whether it's our own faith or our own philosophies. What is Reality 2.0 to you? What made you decide to look into the topics such as this reminds me of like Stephen Hawking type of pursuits where people really want to find answers to this thing called life and being.
Well, it's interesting. When you take a look at science, it has some giant holes in it. The most obvious one that I was first interested in was when you take a look at quantum mechanics, when you take a look at the science of the very, very small, you see all sorts of odd things happen. And the models that exist now basically say, well, that's a paradox. That's a mystery. We don't know about it. Here's a model that answers part of it. Hopefully we'll sort this out someday. And it's things like, well, we've noticed that particles don't actually exist until they're observed in some way, or particles exist in many, many places at once. And when I say particles, I'm talking about the little building blocks of which reality is made, of which this desk that I'm sitting at and various other things are made. There's other holes in science too, like if you take a look at, there's the idea of the Big Bang, that you can trace everything in this universe back to a point 13.8 billion years ago, where it was just a singular point. And the question you might then have would be, okay, well, where did that come from? Or the idea that the universe is expanding. Okay, what's it expanding into? And so I looked at quantum mechanics specifically, and one day I just realized, there's a perfectly good answer. If we use logic, we use reason, we take the rules of Newton and Bacon and all these guys who were great thinkers of the past, and we just apply these rules to the existing experimental data, there's one pretty obvious answer that pops out that for one reason or another, no one has seen or stated yet. They've stated similar things, but nothing quite like this. So I thought, all right, well, I should probably write that up and put it out there as here's an interesting possibility and one that I think holds more water than any of the other ones.
And a lot of it boils down to consciousness.
You could say that. The preeminent model that most people think with or were trained in these days is what you might call a materialistic model, which is there's a big old universe out there. It's huge beyond our comprehension. We're just little guys that evolved up by chance from cellular life that somehow got started. And we're educated. We come and go within 70 years. And life really doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. We're more or less just educated animals. What I found, and what actually is a much better explanation for how life and this universe actually works, is that we're not animals. We're spiritual beings who have bodies and who have minds as well. And we use those minds and we use those bodies in order to accomplish our aims in this universe. And this universe is interesting in that we participate in the creation of it on a moment-to-moment basis.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, we're not pawns. We're proprietors.
So this is actually something. I mean, I've been a student of Christian Science for 43 years, which is a metaphysically based. I wouldn't call it so much a religion as a system of beliefs, but it's Christian and it's underlying, but it is very similar in the fact that her synonyms for God are things like mind with a capital M, life with a capital L, spirit with a capital S. And so for many decades now, 43 years, this has been kind of the basis of my studying. And so what you're saying actually doesn't throw me at all. I mean, it sounds much more easy to believe than, we started from a molecule or a monkey type of thing. So this jibes with, I think, where a lot of us are going. And when, Deepak Chopra, when he came back with all his quantum physics and those books and such, people, I think, were ready. Even people like my dad, who was like a philosopher, but he was also, very science-based and everything. He started getting into it because don't you think as an evolutionary process for us as human beings, we're ready to kind of move there now? Because the other one, like you said, has holes in it. The other theories of just everything being material with nothing else behind it doesn't really hold water anymore. So you also use the word life with a capital L. And in what sense does that mean that for you?
Well, life is essentially a spiritual sort of look, if you will. It's that which creates, that which is conscious. It's a spiritual being or any number of spiritual beings. You and I are each individual spiritual beings, but I guess you could describe life as being that conscious force which is creative and participatory in the creation of this universe. The thing that's interesting about it is that through almost all of man's history, we've been gradually getting smarter, you might say. We've been accumulating data. And so we've gone from wild guesses. If you take a look back, for example, at Aristotle, and, he was looking around him and saying, well, this is what I think is the case based on what I'm seeing. And our data has been getting better and better and better. And so we no longer have to essentially believe. You can look at science, you can look at the data, and you can take the scientific method and say, this is the best answer. And then not only that, but you can test it, albeit indirectly, and see if it works. Does it work for you? And most people who try it find that, yes, indeed, it does actually work. So it has a high degree of workability as well. So we don't have to deal with competing ideologies quite so much as we might have in the past. There is a single thread that unifies us, and we can all kind of get lined up on it. One of my messages is that the spiritual reality is going to be senior to physical reality, because spiritual reality, in effect, creates the physical reality. The physical reality is here for, you could say it's a number of different interesting purposes, but it's, how do I say? I think of it as being kind of like a high school. And we need to graduate, and we need to learn some things. We need to figure out how life works and what life is all about, and how to handle it properly. And so that essentially is more or less the purpose of life in this universe. And that aligns very closely with any number of different religions, maybe not from a dogma point of view, but certainly from a point of view of where they're going and the essential message of what they're trying to say.
Absolutely. I think so. I mean, for me, it personally resonates more when you talk about it like that. But how do you reconcile then? So that if really the spiritual is more of the greater or the causal, what do you call it? Causality.
Yeah.
Then how do you reconcile the so-called matter or physical experience that we're having?
Well, there are, if you just take a look at human beings on planet Earth, right? Just that. I don't know what the exact number is, 6 billion, 8 billion. There's a lot. And if you take a look at all of the various life forms on planet Earth, each of which possess this life force to some degree or another, big, small, whatever, you've got an awful lot of life entities who are all creating stuff simultaneously. And essentially the reality that we deal with day in, day out is the reality. How to say it's a little bit like a symphony in that it's the coordinated creation of a number of different instruments all coming together at once. As a result, it's not easy to change. You can't just look at, for example, a window and say, gone. That won't happen because there's a number of other people who are not saying that at the same time. However, what it does mean is that you can have a little bit of an effect. And you've probably noticed this. You've probably seen people. It's like, that guy gets all the luck. How come that guy always gets the luck and, I don't, or something like that? Well, he's just, you might say, bending the universe toward himself just that little bit.
So what you think is what you get. Would you say that's true?
I would probably actually say what you create is what you have. And going forward from there, what you don't create is what you don't have, and what you destroy is what you can't have.
And is this creation happening in consciousness or in physical movement, action, thrust? Uh-huh. Again, it's interesting to try to reconcile them because I love this. To pursue these types of wonderful topics. This is really, I think we all at some point in our lives hopefully ask the grand questions. Are we human beings having a spiritual experience? Are we spiritual beings having a human experience? Or as one of my spiritual teachers said to me, we're actually spiritual beings having a spiritual experience. We just don't realize it.
Yeah, you could look at it that way, definitely. Most people, I think it's going to be real to them that you are a spiritual being. Well, what was it? The Police said this many years ago on a rock and roll song. We're spirits in the material world. I think that's very much true. You could certainly view it a little bit more transcendentally than that if you wish. But for most people, I think they would be able to eventually come around to the idea of being a spiritual being living in a material world and having some small amount of influence over that world.
See, so, okay, my guest is William Truax. Fascinating conversation about his book that's getting lots of notice. Reality 2.0 is the name of it, a revolutionary new look at the universe and life. And I think we are so in need of that. Even right about now, I think we need to be asking deeper questions. So much it seems to be happening on the outside of us, but this brings us this beautiful opportunity to look within or look at the essential in life and what that is. William, you say that you don't necessarily need faith to understand the spiritual nature of things. How do you explain that?
You could simply try it for yourself. It's not something you. I have a little bit of a bone to pick with people who define religion as being, and this is a common definition amongst especially younger people these days, as blind belief in something that you can't prove. I think religion is actually that body of information and study and techniques which deal with the improvement of conditions of the human spirit. That would be a much better definition of religion and would be a much more useful definition. Fortunately, that definition can encompass pretty much all of the existing established religions. They may need to revamp themselves just a little bit here and there to bring their practices up to date. But essentially what we're dealing with here is we're taking a look at the first good glimmer of light in the 21st century. We've come through a number of centuries, each of which have had their own characterization, if you will. And I think this is going to be the characterization of the 21st century going forward, because once you realize that, I'm a spiritual being and I want to improve my life as a spiritual being, that opens the door to this subject called ethics, which is it's a hot button topic with a lot of people. But it opens the door not just to ethics, but to make an ethics that's workable. And that would be the emphasis of it. And by workable, I mean something that actually makes you feel better, that enhances your life, that makes you happier, that makes you more fulfilled, or points out where your life has meaning. And that's where we're really going with it. Because if you ask the question, what is it that people actually want? Well, they may say, well, I want a big house. I want a big car. I want a sexy wife, whatever. Okay. Why do you want those things? Well, because if I have those, I'll be happy. Okay. Well, what you actually need to say you want is you want happiness. You want meaning. You want fulfillment. And the tools by which those things are achieved are not necessarily material tools, or as other rock and roll musicians have stated, money can't buy me love. Yeah, so it's interesting because it opens the door to actually finding out, gee, what is it we're all about? What is it we're here for? What's my life all about? How can I achieve actual long-term lasting happiness? And this is the first step along that route, is recognizing what the nature of reality actually is.
And so when did this start for you in terms of asking these questions and looking for answers? And, what actually motivated you to write Reality 2.0? Was it your own personal quest that you felt that you got some very, good answers to, and you wanted to share it with the world? Why now? Why Reality 2.0, the book?
Well, where did my quest start? It started when I was a very young child. And I was one of those horrible, annoying children who always said, okay, well, why? And the problem with that, of course, is as a parent, you may have had this experience. If a child keeps pursuing the question, why, eventually you run out of answers. Right? Well, why is the sky blue? So you tell them, well, okay, then so why is that? And why is that? And why is that? And so I've been on that quest essentially my whole life. And I eventually figured out, now that I'm in my 70s, I eventually figured out, oh, this is why things are. Now, I had to study a whole awful lot of things to get here. But having come to an answer that I feel is very enlightening and very workable, I thought, well, the least I can do is write this up for people and tell people about it. It would be a shame if I knew it and I went to my grave knowing it and nobody else did. So, right. Put it out there, let other people have a look, let them evaluate it for themselves. If they say, nah, it's BS, I don't want to have anything to do with it, great, don't. It's not for you. But I think for a large number of people, they're out there looking, they know there's more to life than what they're seeing. They're asking questions. And it's like, all right, here's an answer. Take a look at it, see if it works. And like I said before, I feel pretty much the same way about religion, which is that everybody needs to find some sort of a religious practice that works for them. I'm not evangelizing for any one particular religion, whether it be Christian Science or Buddhism or Catholicism or whatever. Just find something that actually works for you. And you may have to try a few.
Sure. Absolutely. Or even, read a book such as yours, because what it does is it opens your mind. It makes you ask the questions. And then you have so much beautiful research within the book itself. I like your gentle approach. William Truax, I think that, this is a topic that could easily get very didactic and almost hit you over the head with some of what you've come up with, but you don't approach it that way. I find it very, it's very accessible. And there's a kindness and a sort of sense of love underneath all the science and the other things that you've come to in Reality 2.0. There is a gentleness to it. And I like that approach because I think it's easier to learn from that. And I think you've done us a great favor by doing all of this research, but putting it in the format that you have. The book is called Reality 2.0, a revolutionary new look at the universe and life. Now, if that doesn't cover just about all of it, I don't know what will. Where can we can find it wherever fine books are sold. I know that Amazon has ranked it very, very high, William Truax. So we can just tell people wherever fine books are sold, they can go there. Do you have a website also that you would like to share with us?
Most assuredly. The website title is reality20book.com. It's got various data in there. It's got teasers, little summaries, and it's also got,
good videos too.
Got some videos there.
Yeah.
Got some blog postings up this past week, which essentially delve into what I said in the book in more detail in specific areas. So the blog posts are very interesting. And I don't know if the book is available at all fine booksellers or not, but I know it's available on Amazon.
That I know too. And at this point in life, Amazon is considered a fine bookstore because so many people get their books there. Reality 2.0, again, is the name of the book, Reality 2.0. And the website, once again, is reality20book.com. Okay. They're very good. Reality20book.com. William Truax, and Truax is Truax. Thank you so much. And for doing a lot of the work so we don't have to. We just get to enjoy the book.
And thank you very much for having me, Laura. Have a lovely afternoon.
You as well.
You're listening to The Way Home with Laura Smith. Once again, here's Laura.
I cannot believe, where did the time go? I think 2025 was really the fastest year on record. Here we are in 2026, already talking about getting our taxes in, and it's hard to imagine, but it's true. So I have someone here who is going to help us out with some wonderful tips and fill us in on what we may not know about our taxes this year that could be a little bit different. Andy Phillips, Vice President of the Tax Institute at H&R Block. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
So this, it's time already to start e-filing, correct?
That's right. E-file with the IRS opens today, which is kind of viewed as the ceremonial opening of tax season each year.
Okay. And, but for the rest of people who aren't doing it online and they good old fashioned take your documents into your tax preparer's office, we have until what day exactly?
So this year we'll have April 15th. It varies each year because some years, the 15th will fall on a federal holiday on a weekend. And
yes.
So then it comes into the next week. This year it looks like we'll actually fall on April 15th.
Wow, that is unusual for sure. But there's something different about this year. And I have heard, and you're going to tell us all about it, but I've heard that one big, beautiful bill from this administration that was passed is going to have implications for our taxes this year. Exactly what are they?
Absolutely. So the one big, beautiful bill was passed last summer in July of 2025. And what they did is made many of the provisions in that bill, which I'll talk about here in a moment, effective for tax year 2025, meaning they're going to impact the returns that folks are going to be filing here over the next few months. And so virtually everyone is going to have some level of impact. The bill did two big things for individuals. One, it extended and slightly modified a lot of the tax changes that were made in what we call the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was passed during President Trump's first term. Think the larger standard deduction, lower tax rates, elimination of personal independency exemptions. But what it also did was it added a host of new provisions, many of which are effective for these tax returns. So for people that work for tips, people that work over and get paid overtime, seniors, small business owners, all these people are going to have some type of impact on their tax return. Some more than others.
Well, that's I'm very happy for them. I have to say, all those years I was a waitress and didn't get that provision. Darn, but that's okay. We've moved on. All right. Now, common mistakes that people make with their taxes. I know that every year there seems to be some little thing that I've either left out or provided that I didn't need to. Tell us, what are some of the most common mistakes we need to look out for?
Absolutely. So first, one of the most common mistakes we see each year at H&R Block is that people have life changes. They get married, they have a kid, they buy a home, they start a new job, they start a business, and they don't realize that creates tax changes and they don't account for it on their tax return. In a lot of cases, what happens there is those folks end up leaving money on the table because they don't realize, hey, I had a kid, I can claim the child tax credit, or I can claim the dependent care credit because me and if you're married, your spouse, pay for childcare while you work or look for work. And so not accounting for those life changes on your tax return often creates mistakes. Another one is not staying up to speed on the changes and leaving money on the table. So we talked about this year. Let's just use a simple example for overtime. So someone who's making 60 grand a year and makes 10 of that in overtime, this year is going to see savings of over $1,200 from this new deduction for overtime alone. A single filer can exclude up to $12,500 in overtime. A tipped worker can exclude up to $25,000 in qualified tips. So not accounting for these new rules on your tax return, again, can leave a lot of money on the table. So it's not a good year to leave it to chance. If you're not sure how these rules impact you or how to take advantage of them, maybe a good year to speak with a professional.
Absolutely. That is really exciting. I'm happy for those people. Now, the importance of filing electronically, especially important this year. Why?
Well, filing electronically is always important. Your return is going to get processed more efficiently, but this year it's particularly important. There's been a number of changes at the IRS over the last years. And one thing we are seeing is that tax returns are filed by paper, that you stick in, put a stamp on an envelope and stick in the mail. Those are taking several weeks or longer, sometimes months to process. And so, for instance, if you're due a refund, you want to get that as quickly as possible. If you file electronically, the IRS says 9 in 10 people are going to get that refund within 21 days. So it's really important this year, particularly because of what I mentioned with extended timelines on paper processing, that people file electronically and that they don't make any mistakes that would cause their return to fall out into what we call special processing. If your return falls out because you made some sort of math error or things like that, and a human's going to have to look at it, again, it may take several weeks or longer for you to get your return processed, and if due, for you to get your refund.
That is great. Thank you so much, because you know what? It's easy to make these small mistakes, but they don't feel small when they actually do happen, and there are implications to it. So speaking with a professional is always, I think it's always the best advice. And H&R Block has certainly been around long enough to know exactly what to do. I really thank you for being with us. Andy Phillips, Vice President of the Tax Institute at H&R Block. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you all for listening to The Way Home this week, and to my wonderful guests. And may you all have a wonderful week that is safe, that's happy, healthy, and full of lots of miracles as well. I'm Laura Smith. See you next time from The Way Home.
Podcasts by Federated Media.